This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television.
Without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Ted Stockmon.
Hi, everybody. Glad you can make it. A couple topics I got to cover before I start the presentation. As a member of the Historical Society, I got to plug a couple things. Coming up on the 27th is a walk through Banton Street. I don't know if anybody remembers the old Banton Street. Sponsored by the North Haven Trail Association and the North Haven Historical Society. Invite you to join them to walk Banton Street, the forgotten neighborhood. That's April 27th at 10 a.m. at the Quinnipiac Trail, which can be accessed on Banton Street off of Upper State. You go right behind the gas station on the Parkway. I actually have flyers for this if anybody wants them. The other issue is membership forms for the Historical Society. Sadly, we seem to be losing people in recent years, so we're trying to get our membership back up. So I have forms if anybody wants to join it. I mean, the fees are very nominal. Annual membership for an individual is only $15. There's family membership for forever, whatever. But if anyone wants any of these, they could see me, I guess, afterwards, after the presentation. Or if you want a flyer for the Banton Street walk, I have those as well. It's a good spot for these. Right here. If I turn the lights off, these slides look way better. Do you guys mind? There's no dimmer switch, and you can't shut off some lights and not the other. It's like it's all or nothing. And
I'm shutting the TV off so it doesn't distract. You ready?
Isn't that way better?
Yes.
All right. A quick background. Much like my dad, I'm a history buff. More so as I get older, and really got into North Haven history a lot over the last decade. That's probably because I think what my mother's here, we're fourth generation, I believe. 1901, my mother's side came over from Italy to work in the brickyard. So I'm not a technical guy. I'm not an expert on brick making. I'm not an expert on the history of Stiles or any other brickyard in town. I know more than the average person, but I'm far from an expert. Luckily, I have people in the audience tonight I have a gentleman here, Mr. Gagliardi, who actually worked for Stiles. I only met him a few weeks ago. He was good enough to donate about 3 dozen custom molds for brick that he saved from the dumpster probably 30 years ago or so. So I've got photos. It's about 115 slide PowerPoint presentation. Some of the slides were donated by residents whose family members work for the brickyard. Some are from my grandfather's album, and the rest are from the Historical Society. I got some more that from the 70s from a guy I know whose grandfather was a foreman at Stiles. So if nothing else, it's worth coming just for the slides. It's worth putting up with my babble just to see these slides, in my opinion. As you can see by the picture there, the child labor laws probably weren't into effect yet. See the barefoot kid in the front? Could have been. Everything's going wrong here. You can see the brick molds, the wheelbarrows they carried them in, metal wheels. Now, first of all, how many people here are related to anybody that work in the brick industry? Anybody? Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. In my case, my great-grandfather came over in 1901 with 6 children, so most of his sons worked in it, and then my grandfather for 48 years. But The other question is, why was the brick industry the longest industry in North Haven history, and why was brick making big here? It's because we have the largest clay deposit. Till this day, we have the largest clay deposit on the East Coast. And the reason for that is, like 7 million years ago, the glacier that carved out the Quinnipiac Valley came through here, and as it came through, it dragged trees and vegetation and debris with it. And then it came to a stop on the north side of East Rock, and that's why you have that huge salt marsh between exit 8 and 9, between 91 and State Street. That huge salt marsh where the glacier came to a rest. When it came to a rest, all that vegetation it had dragged underneath and crushed underneath it, is what created clay as it decomposed or whatever. Even before the Europeans came here, the Indians would come here to make their clay pots and utensils. And it's all along, basically the clay beds are right along I-91 from exit 10 south, between exits 9 and 11, I guess. And there's that salt marsh. That's basically, I took this picture right in the breakdown lane between exit 8 and 9 southbound. So what you're looking at is State Street. And that ridge is Hartford Turnpike. It's probably Hamden on that side. And you can see the Quinnipiac River winding through there. Oh, wrong way. Every body of water between exits 9 and 11 is not a natural body of water. They were either a clay pit or a sand pit. That large lake by exit 9 was a sand pit. There was never a lake there. That was a lake that filled in 1963. They hit a vein of water and it just filled in. This is right alongside 91, kind of near the Stoddard Avenue overpass. It's just a clay pit that filled in. Eventually you hit water. You dig deep enough, you hit water, and it just fills in. The other myth among most people around here is that Stiles was the only brickyard. It wasn't. There was at least 7 of them during the 1800s. And here's some of them right there. Stiles, Shares. Shares was also known as North Haven Brick. Ironically, it was called North Haven Brick and was just over the line in Hamden on State Street. FI Shares, I'm not sure where that was. Davis Brick, that was in North Haven. Monowese Brick, that was the second to last brickyard in operation. And that was down where Republic Drive now is. Between Quinnipiac Avenue and 91, where Republic Drive is, that's where that clay pit was. There's still some company homes still there. Connecticut Brick, I'm not sure where that was. I think that was another one along State Street. Hang on. There's a location of most of them. This is the Quinnipiac River going north. There's Broadway. So you can see that they're all basically along the Quinnipiac River. Stiles had an operation on what is now Stiles Lane. What was the chemical company? Upjohn. Before Upjohn was there, there was a clay pit there for Stiles. That's right there. And then what later became known as the tire pond, right on the Hamden line. That's right there. It looks like Ives was just above it. Monowese Brick on the bottom. It's easier to find Stiles bricks in town. A little harder to find Monowese Brick ones. There they all are. S&R was Stiles and Reynolds. Stiles didn't just own a brickyard in North Haven. They had one in Berlin and another one in Massachusetts. There's an old ad I found. Looks a little confusing, doesn't it? Yards at North Haven, Connecticut. Offices at Grand Avenue, New Haven. This is a Yellow Page ad from 1941. As you can tell by the, you like those phone numbers? See it. Here's a timeline on brick manufacturing for North Haven. The first record of brick being used for construction was 1721, and that was the James Whitmore House, who was the first minister of the Northeast Parish. North Haven, I believe, was the Northeast Parish. The house was built on the south side of the green and was stone and brick. There's no evidence that the brick was made in North Haven because there's no writing on the brick back then. I have some of those 1700s bricks right up front here, but that was demolished in 1850. 1725, the first record of brick making in North Haven, the estate of Nathaniel Thorpe Jr., houses, land, bricks, and boards. His brother Moses inherited the brickyard. 1759, the first house made of North Haven bricks, built by Joel Bassett, demolished in the 1920s. 1760, 1786, brickmaking was a sideline for a few farmers. Simple operation only requiring a few men and a bit of clay, a pit, and charcoal. At least a dozen brickyards existed in North Haven by the time of the Revolution. 1800, more deposits of clay were discovered along the Quinnipiac River, giving rise to more brickyards. 1820 to 1830, growth of brickmaking industry was very slow during this 10-year period. The process was a two-man operation, a striker who threw the bricks into a mold and a carrier who carried the mold away to turn them out to dry. 1820 to 1860, Irish immigration increased the brickmaking workforce in North Haven. 1834 to 35, growth spurt occurred in the brickmaking industry in North Haven as a result of the building of two churches, St. John's Episcopal and the Congregational Church, which are both on the green. 1848, North Haven had 14 brickyards and 4.6 million bricks were produced that year. Keep in mind, there's no trucks. That's all horse-drawn. 1886, North Haven Centennial. At the parade, the brick manufacturers' displays were the first to do the significant role, first due to the significant role brickmaking played in North Haven's economy. Also, Solomon Lindsley built the Brick Memorial Town Hall to celebrate the centennial. So Town Hall is also North Haven brick. 1895, John Reynolds moved to North Haven to become the vice president of I.L. Stiles and Sons Brick Company. Under him, the brick manufacturing operation is expanded and modernized. Am I going the right way? I already did these, right? Timeline continued. 1920, 1930. Decline in brickmaking industry is beginning. Brickyards are reduced from 3 to 2. John Reynolds was North Haven's wealthiest man. The chief industry in North Haven is still brickmaking. The Monowese Fire Station is built by bricks donated by the Monowese Brick Company. 1932, a new firehouse was built of bricks in the center of town, which is still there. 1933, the Monowese Brick Company of New Haven went bankrupt. It was reorganized and became the Monowese Brickmaking of North Haven. I.L. Stiles and Sons Brick Company closed down 2 of its 3 brickyards, one of which remained closed permanently. 1940, North Haven's grand list showed 5 manufacturers. Stiles Brick, Monowese Brick, Webb Asphalt Paving Company, Tenonine Cider Mill, and American Creosoling Company. I.L. Stiles was the largest taxpayer. North Haven actively pursued new industries in an effort to keep the tax rate down. United Aircraft moved to North Haven in 1951 and employed 5,000 people, which was North Haven's population in 1940. 1958, I.L. Stiles and Sons Brick Company was sold to Plasticrete Corporation and became a manufacturer of cement blocks. Here's one of the oldest pictures I was lucky to obtain. It's from the Historical Society. It's Stiles Brickyard, circa 1889. I believe this is, you're all familiar with Leonardo Drive? It wasn't always called Leonardo Drive. It was originally called Railroad Avenue. So when you see the Yellow Page ad for Stiles Brick, it said 25 Railroad Avenue. That's now Leonardo Drive. So this is Leonardo Drive, is where this is. And of course, you can see the horse and wagons. You see the big chimney. That must be where there's a kiln, I'm guessing. And these are the clay sheds. Hang on. Here's a close-up. This is right in the center of town. Even after the Civil War, and especially after the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, people continued to leave North Haven for better opportunities in the West. Change was visible in North Haven after the Civil War. In the first place, the expanding brickyard operation along the railroad brought immigrants to North Haven. At first, brickyard workers came from Ireland and Germany. After 1880, they were predominantly from Italy and Poland. 11 out of every 100 people living in North Haven in 1880 had been born outside the United States. Another less obvious change was that by 1850, not everyone in North Haven was farming. Small industries like the agricultural implements factory on Clintonville Road began about 1830. That building's still there, by the way. In the 1850 census, only 62% of the population were listed as farmers. There were also 65 mechanics, 25 brickmakers, and 14 shoemakers. These pictures I love because you can see the small clay wagons, horse-drawn, some are oxen-drawn. Check out the ladies that keep these guys fed. Got the Italian bread, the big knife to cut it, and she's got, I'm going to assume that's water. You guys notice the railroad tracks? Stiles had its own train to bring the clay from the pits that were farther down State Street. It was a mini train. They called it the Dinky because it was a miniature train. Kind of looked like the trains you see at amusement parks. There's pictures of them coming, so you'll see it. Another close-up of the ladies. Here's something that Merriman Mansfield wrote on bricks. As generally known, clay for the making of brick is formed about 10 feet below the topsoil in the low section or old riverbed part of Connecticut, Massachusetts. In the olden days, clay was shoveled into an ox cart or horse-drawn wagon, then taken and dumped into a pug mill. There, the clay was either moistened with water or mixed with sand and sometimes with coal dust to bring it to a consistency workable to be pressed into a mound of brick size. The mound was sprinkled or dusted with mounding sand so that the brick would come out of the mound easily, out of the mold easily. That's their typo. The back of the brick or part showing in the mold was cut down to the mold to remove any excess clay and leave a smooth surface. The bricks were placed in the sun to dry for several days to a week, then placed in a kiln of various sizes and heights. The bricks are placed in 3 on 3, after which an arch has been formed to allow the placing and burning of wood. The burning dries or cures the brick into its hard or usable form for construction work. During the 1920s, clay was carried from the clay bank to the pug mill by a gasoline-driven engine or steam engine pulling several cars of clay that could be dumped into the mill. That's the dinky. The clay was forced into a mound that could hold 8 bricks. The molds were first placed on a barrel-shaped cylinder that held the molding sand. A man took the mold from the cylinder and placed it in the machine under the press. It then received the clay and was pushed from the machine, where excess clay was removed by a man holding a knife-like striking blade. Another man dumped the mold of brick into a pallet, which was placed onto a pallet, racked a pallet-racked wheelbarrow, which was then pushed by another man out inside a yard of drying racks. The pallets were placed about 15 pallets high on cleats forming the rack. They were then allowed to dry by the sun. After drying, they were removed from the pallets on a brick-carrying wheelbarrow. The barrels were in turn pushed by a man called a brick wheeler, who upon reaching the kiln area would toss the brick one at a time to a brick set, who in turn set them in a kiln where they would eventually be burnt or made entirely dry and as hard as we know brick. The method of firing the brick changed from wood burning to oil burning under jet pressure in the kilns. The method of drying the green clay brick changed also in the late 20s, and pallets were automatically conveyed into a drying house on endless cables where men placed them on a series of steam pipes where they could be processed or dried overnight. The bricks were then taken in much the same manner as before and wheeled from the opposite side of the steam pipes and taken to the kiln area. This brief story on brickmaking may give one an idea of how bricks come about. Remember I told you some of them were oxen drawn? That ain't no horse. Those aren't horses. And that's right about, at that point in time, my great-grandfather would have been there over a decade. He was a wagon driver who later became a foreman of the barn, which is where they kept the horses and the oxen. So he must have learned English quick, or not. You gotta like this kid, huh? Drinking out of the, what is that? A ladle? I'm assuming early 1900s. You see the wheelbarrow type, it's kind of like a hand truck wheelbarrow that they put these, the molds on. The molds loaded with clay, with the brick. There's an early steam shovel. I believe this is Stiles, right in the center of North Haven. You see they're down in a clay pit. They're down about 25 feet. There's ground level up there. They're about 25 feet down, 20 feet down. You see it was a steam engine. Those wagons didn't hold a lot of clay. This is also Stiles, the original operation here right on where Leonardo Drive now is. There's a shed that they put them in to dry. I'm told that was the sales office. Another angle. And you notice they're standing on the roof?
They were in the other picture too. Did you see that? The picture before?
Yeah. Well, these boards aren't nailed down. What they'll do is, if it's a sunny day and they want those bricks to dry, they stagger these boards so that the sun can go through and the bricks dry. Yeah. You see, these boards aren't nailed down. They look flimsy. You know, if you didn't know better, you think they're flimsy, but no, they're not secured. Yeah. Well, they're using Mother Nature to dry those bricks. The quicker you dry them, the quicker you bake them. See the planks? That's basically what they are, is the big fat planks, and you can either cover up the openings, or you could stagger them and leave openings. Of course, somebody on the roof. This is a nice picture because it shows you just how deep they went, which is 15 to 20 feet. See the wagons all lined up? This one's taken off, that one's loaded, he's taken off. This one's waiting in line. This one's getting loaded. I mean, these are the Model A of steam shovels. Corrugated tin. They don't even have treads on them. They have metal wheels with cleats on them. And everything's by cable. See the cable? I guess they like posing for the cameras. At risk to their own safety. Those have to be the Italians. They're proud. Probably rolled up their sleeves, too. Now, to keep those kilns going, you needed lumber. And brickmaking wasn't always 12 months of the year. It depended on how extreme the weather was. Some of the employees were seasonal, and some of them worked 12 months of the year. Most of the employees that work 12 months of the year are the ones with families. And a lot of them would cut down timber in the winter to use for the kilns. And that's what this is. There's lumber stacked up on that wagon. Some of the lumber came from as far away as Sleeping Giant. There's people that would buy acres of Sleeping Giant just to sell the lumber on it to Stiles or whatever brickyard wanted it. It was about 6 horses there. I believe this is State Street. I'm not exactly sure where. But this guy's hauling bricks. And I wonder how long it takes to stack those bricks like that. With a good mustache comes great responsibility. Remember that. You know how heavy those wheelbarrows have to be? Look at the little metal wheels on them. And they're wooden wheelbarrows. But I just think these pictures are a treasure, though. That's the one from the beginning. And there's the dinky. That's the first one. And you can see these wagons were full of clay. The steam shovels would fill those wagons down at the pits. Because eventually, they had pits at other locations other than the center of town here. They were down along State Street. So this was a way better way to bring the clay in, which is their little train. This is the first of 2 engines they had. You can tell this is the turn of the century one. Gotta have thick skin when people tell you got a dinky locomotive. Clay press? I have a couple experts in here that might be able to expand or explain this. Anybody? Is this what you fed the clay into? I think it's Stiles. The clay press. I'm going to guess it's hot in there because he took his sleeves right off. Nice picture of the standard brick mold, which was 6 bricks. I can't read which company that is. My family found these 2 weeks ago. These are my grandfather's barn. I'm guessing when they went from Stiles to Plasticrete, my grandfather saved them from the dumpster. My grandfather's been gone since '72, so we eventually found it. There's 3 of these. This was the display in the basement of where the Historical Society is next door. Right now there's renovations going on, so the whole display is crammed into a large closet, but it's a great opportunity to see one of these molds up close. This is a Stiles one from more recent years because it's in the cursive. And these are the molds for custom bricks. You know, a lot of these bricks went to commercial buildings, universities, schools, whatever. So that they needed more than standard brick. They needed custom bricks. So those are the custom molds. Anybody recognize it? Well, it's a pug mill. I think this is where they added water to the clay to give it the wet clay, you know, because they're digging it up dry or moist, and then they mix it with water here before it goes into the molds. But I know this is Stiles in the late '60s. I recently got this only a year or two ago. These photos from a friend of mine whose grandfather was a foreman. Mr. Betta was a foreman there for years. His grandson gave these slides to me. There's the opening in one of the kiln, in the kiln. You see how big that kiln is? So what are these, gas fed? Oil? Oil fed. Then the wood. So you got it going with the oil? Black and white picture of the kiln. You see he's feeding some timber in there. Anybody guess where this is? It is, and to be exact, that's the freight building, which is still there. This is the back of the houses on Phillips Place. And this is the back of somebody's barn or garage, and here's a close-up of it. This is the old sales office. I'm told that, I think in the 60s, late 60s, there was a big fire at Stiles. And as a result of the fire, that got demolished. That's true. Another shot of the brick all stacked up. You see the openings in the roof to let in the air and the sun to help in the drying process. There's the firewood ready to go. Doesn't look like they were picky either. Any idea what that is, Mr. Gagliardi? That's what I thought. They said these are on slides that I recently obtained. That's from Plasticrete.
That's the wire cut operation. The bricks with the holes in them, they would get sliced by wire rather than molded and cut by hand. Scrape the clay off.
Conveyor belt. I believe this is late 60s at Stiles. Steam cure?
Yeah, on the pipes. Each brick was 4 pounds, so they'd be lifting up anywhere from 35 to 40 pounds on each pallet to put them on the steam racks.
They didn't have to go to the gym when they got out of work. This was the employees' housing for Montoise Brick. Around the turn of the century, Stiles provided housing for its 34 employees. These were rented by the workers, and all the meals were eaten in a main dining hall. A few of the houses were equipped with kitchens for the married workers. Brickmaking was seasonal employment in those days, so most of the labor was migratory. The others who remained during the winter cleared the land and sold timber for firewood. These were usually the ones who had their families with them. Stiles had a commissary, and the school for the children is what is now the Masonic Hall on the green, which was the original, not the original center school, it was the second center school. I have a picture of that, I think, coming up. These houses are on, I forgot the name of the road. It's off Quinnipiac Avenue. Cody Lane. Cody Lane, it looks like a driveway. It's gravel and dirt. But these houses are still there, and these were housing for Monowese brick employees. This picture was taken in the late 50s. The houses are still there, and they look just like that. I think only one has even lived in. This is at State and Divine. This house right there is still there. It's the second house south of the gas station. And you see they're duplexes. You know, one family lives in the left half, one family lives in the right house. I don't know why a Stiles steam shovel is digging in the middle of State Street. Yep, the guy right here. But check out the car, you can tell 1920-ish. That's the house that's blocked out by the steam shovel. It's still there. That's my grandfather with his machine. I'm going to say early 50s. And that's on what was later called the tire pond, just right on the Hamden line. I have pictures coming up of this clay pit. You could fit like 4 football fields in this clay pit. That's how huge it was. When they ended up filling it in, they filled it in with all the buildings they tore down in New Haven in the early 60s to put in I-95 and I-91. All the buildings they tore down to put in the highway is what they filled in this pit with. And then the top layer was tires.
Ted, is the kid your Uncle Rich?
Is he in that picture? Yeah, here's my uncle. Give you a little timeline. That little kid's 72 now. Am I right? Yeah. Now you notice, this is down the State Street operation, and they're way down. The sides here are like 70 feet. Matter of fact, there's a giant pump that had to work nonstop to keep that from filling in because it was right alongside the Quinnipiac River. Now you notice all the machines are on planks so they don't get stuck in the mud. The truck drives on planks, the machine's on planks. And that's my grandfather. There's the second dinky. Not as charming as the first one. It's kind of square and boring looking. But you can see this is loaded with clay, and I guess it tilted. It goes up high and then you tilt it and it falls out into whatever they want it to fall into. But Stiles was the only one that had its own little train. These are the Stiles homes. One still remains. This one went down when I-91 was built.
I lived in that house,
Yes. With the right side or the left side?
on the right side.
Right side?
That one there. That's Gary's bedroom.
This one was clearly older. Yeah, so 1963, that was torn down to build I-91, right here on Broadway. You see the address, Railroad Avenue? It's now called Leonardo Drive, just so you don't get confused. And you could access that from Phillips Place back then. You didn't have to go down Stoddard Avenue.
Was he the one that had the construction company, Leonardo?
Yeah.
Okay, I know him.
Yeah, he filled in some of the pits just to extend that road.
Yeah, there were 2 brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew Leonardo.
This is like a postcard. I still want. This is the State Street operation. Part of it, like from here left is North Haven, and from the middle right is like Camden. It's literally on the line. You can see how huge the sheds were. Tons and tons of drying sheds. They had a big operation there, and you can see how far down the pits are. Now, right behind this whole facility is the Quinnipiac River, literally right behind it. Another shot of it. Those are huge sheds. I'm gonna guess that where there's a huge chimney, there's a kiln. The entrance to this facility is right on the south side of the Goodwill store on State Street. This is the same location. You know what a Goodwill store is? It's right where this pond used to be. And you can see it must have filled in. Must have been a rain or the pump didn't work. That's the top of a steam shovel. That's the boom on a steam shovel. On the top of this shed, it says Stiles Brick Company. Right up here. Here's the railroad tracks that run along State Street. There's the railroad tracks. So whoever took the picture is basically standing where State Street now is. Same spot. Those houses are still there. All those houses are there. Right here is where the Goodwill store is. The town line is right up here. Now to put a face on brickyard workers, I threw in my own family, which I'm proud to talk about and to show you how they weren't migratory. They came here, they never left, and ended up doing very well. That's my great grandfather who came here in 1901, having left his wife and 3 kids back in the province of Modena, Italy, because he had to have a sponsor and a job waiting for him. So got a sponsor and came here to work for Stiles, saved up his money, and in 3 years he had enough money to buy the house. And then the wife and 3 kids came over, and then they had 3 more. My grandfather was the middle of the 3 born here. I think my grandfather was born on Divine Street. Zora. Yeah. So that's Sperandio and Maria Guandolini, my great-grandparents, my mother's grandparents. Naturally, a mustache. Well, of all his accomplishments, the only thing my family talks about is, he had blue eyes. Because none of us had any since. I think there's a family portrait of him. I carried on the tradition. Yep. He died in 1941. Like I said, he had 6 children, 3 born in Italy, so 4 boys, 2 girls. My grandfather was the second to last. So there was a big age gap between the ones born in Italy and the ones born here. So here's 4 of these studs are Guandolinis. My grandfather, my uncle Giulio Guandolini, Louis Guandolini, who's the baby, right? Francesco, or as Frank we called him. I'm not sure who this is. It's got to be a friend or a relative. But these are the 4 boys. The 2 sisters. One of them married a well-known North Havener in later years. Married a Rebeshi. So the Rebeshi, who was the home builder, was first cousin to my mother. There's all kinds of North Haven connections. There's Julie, Uncle Julie, we called him. There he is with his kids, maybe nieces and nephews, I'm not sure.
Are you related to Richie Guandolini?
That's my uncle. Yeah. We're only like 13 years apart. He's a lot younger than my mother. And the only boy, so that made him the prince. This gives you an idea what North Haven was in like 1941. 5,300 people. Predominating nationalities, English and Italian. No shocker there. Number of schools, 3. Number of pupils, 595 with 23 teachers. 2 libraries. I got this out of the 1941 phone directory. This is from that directory, and this is State Street. Look at the names. North Haven had Little Italy. See, there's Uncle Julie, the Gianninis, the Guandolinis, the Provisolis, the Marolas, Marinos, Ferrari, Gelati, Chiari. A lot of them ended in I. So mostly from the same region of Italy. So this is Staten Dixwell, Staten Devine. This is actually from State Street from Skiff right up to Broadway, basically. I also got Stoddard Avenue here. So these are the people that lived in the company housing. See, Peter DeSimone. Wife is good friends. Betta. He was a foreman. Peter Betta. What's that? The lower end? Yep. Was that lower Middletown Avenue? Okay, yep. Back when it was a neighborhood. And of course, Italians still being fairly new to the area, the locals butchered their names. This is supposed to be Giulio and Rosalia. So they managed to have a woman and a woman married. But they butchered them. Spelled Pacino wrong. It's with a K. Those are relatives. And of course, this was typical. This is 3 generations in one house. This is 77 Elm Street, which is walking distance from here. There's Sperandio. He's the one who came from Italy, my great-grandfather. There's my grandfather. There's my mother, who's over there, raising her hand. That's little Maria. My grandfather's brother, Louis. His wife, I'm going to guess Louis Jr. Louis. And this would be a grandson, Father Julie. Yeah, he, first North Havener ever ordained a Catholic priest was my mother's cousin, Julie, Father Julie. Matter of fact, I got a good... Not all of that is my family. 2/3 is, though. There's my grandmother. Chris, there's your mom. That's Mrs. DeSimone. There's my mother. Should I give away your age, Ma? My mom's 82 now. Look at the little Rita DeSimone. This is where the kids went to school. Most of the ones that kids of the brickyard workers. Yeah, that was the second center school. The original one was a little dinky one over here 200 years ago, but now it's a Masonic hall. And of course, when they went there, this center school didn't exist. And of course, the original St. Barnabas wasn't really a church. It was a chapel. I mean, it was the size of my garage. And that's it. Washington Avenue is right down here. There's the rectory, and there's the little chapel, which was on Clintonville Road. My mother said it was so hot in this chapel in the summer, people would pass out, and nobody would even bat an eyelash. So, yep, somebody else went down. Keep talking. But that's the original St. Barnabas. It was a chapel. One of my mother's cousins getting married. I can't keep up with them. She had 31st cousins, and that was just on her father's side. There's my grandfather on a circa 1920 steam shovel with a corrugated roof. It's made of wood, corrugated roof. So he's young there. Look how skinny he is. Now there he is again. You see, they always dug at least 20 feet down. And you see he's on the planks. He'll get stuck if you don't drive on the planks. This is my great-grandfather with the vegetable garden. Notice the vineyard. Got to have a vineyard. Quarter acre of grapes. There's my mom. So there's my great-grandfather, like I said, and his grandson, Julie, we called him Julie, became the first North Haven resident to become ordained a priest. I'll give you a more updated photo. He passed away about a decade ago. There he is. And kind of the point I'm leading to is, not only were, the Italian immigrants that came here to work in the brickyard, not only were they not migratory, I mean, they acclimated very quick and got very involved with the town. Before he was a priest, he served in World War II. He didn't become a priest till he came back from the war. He was one of 3 or 4 grandsons that served. This grandson didn't come home. This is my great-grandfather's, one of his daughters, Antoinette. This was her son. Was it 4 daughters and a son? And they lost the son in Guam. 5 sisters. He had 5 sisters, and he didn't come home. 19 years old. By the way, I will mention, they were being overrun by the Japanese, and everybody ran for their lives. He stayed in his foxhole, trying to take out as many as he could. Got shot, still kept shooting. It took a grenade to take him out. That's why he got the Bronze Star. He didn't run when everybody else ran. He was a star baseball player at Lyman Hall. Frankie Pacino. There's his obituary. By the way, he was offered to go to officer candidate school, but because it was the end of the war, he didn't want to miss it. So he stayed in a recon unit and paid the ultimate price. 2 other grandsons came home. One was an airplane mechanic in the Pacific, and then there was another one I'll show you in a minute. There's the family getting his award, Purple Heart and his Bronze Star. So they became Americans in every sense real quick, within a generation. This grandson ended up being in a recon unit, crossing the Rhine into Germany before the rest of the forces. Born Guandolini. He was Giulio's son, the oldest son's son. And this grandson was one of the daughter's sons, so he didn't have the same last name, but it's Paul Rabeshi. He was one of the biggest home builders in North Haven back in the 60s and 70s. Passed away this past year. Anybody heard of him? In North Haven, Paul Rabeshi? Yeah. His mother was one of my grandfather's sisters, so he was half Guandolini. Another grandson, he's the brother of the guy you just saw. He stayed in town. He was a part-time police officer for about 20 years. Passed away in the last decade. Here's a nice shot. This is a really good picture. Somehow my grandfather got aerial photographs of the brickyard in the early 50s. And to give you a little perspective, this is State Street. This is State Street, Hamden. The town line's right up here. See the railroad tracks that run alongside State Street? There's the tire pond in its early stages. See, it's not even a big hole yet. There's all those buildings. There's the Quinnipiac River, and you follow it up, and here's the center of North Haven. You see the steeples from the churches on the green. I think that might be Pratt and Whitney, that huge building with a water tower. Saco Point Road's right here. But you can see the clay beds and how they're right alongside the Quinnipiac, both sides of the Quinnipiac. See how the Quinnipiac snakes? I think in Indian, Quinnipiac means winding river or something like that. This shows you how big those sheds were, the drying sheds. See all the openings in the roof? So you can get the air in there, dry them out. Now here's the Quinnipiac River along the edge here. So you can see how close they are to the river. That's why these huge pits, this one's like 70, 80 feet down, they had these huge pumps that were constantly pumping any water out that would start to fill up. This building's still there. All these sheds are gone. Yeah, this is what became the tire pond. This whole thing was eventually dug out. This is early stages. You see the steam shovel here? Probably my grandfather. You see how they had to drive out? They had to drive out, then you had to go all the way around here, around here, around here, and then come out onto State Street. Another view. This is it dug out more. Now there's State Street. We're looking northwest. You know, Hartford Turnpike is up on the ridge here. State Street down here. You see how far down they are. They're like 70 feet down. And there's the pump house. That's the pump house. See the water down here? That pump is running 24/7. On the weekends, I would sleep over at my grandparents' house, and I would have to go with my grandfather to go check on it, make sure it didn't shut down. Every weekend morning. There it is, right there. It's the pump house. There's State Street, the railroad tracks, and this is the giant clay pit, later known as the tire pond. But the pump is inside this building here. I think we saw that one. It's a lot of clay in one bucket. Here's some employees, circa 1950 at Stiles. Yeah, it's post-World War II. Got away from the mustaches. You can tell which guy works in the office. I recently got photos of this. That must have been or it's the name they gave a certain brick. Like, you know, you want to buy cheap bricks or good bricks. I don't know if there's a difference. Notice the telephone number. It's a different type of bucket. I think this is where you go straight down, whereas the other steam shovels are good for digging out an embankment, and this one just goes straight down. Any idea what they're doing here?
Placing the steel pallet under the machine that would pop each brick out at a time.
The-
Brick would go onto the steel pallet and then go into the drying room.
Those are metal?
Those are steel pallets.
Ah. This is late 60s, I believe.
Late 50s or 60s.
Yep. It's color slide, so I'm going to guess 60s. Also talks about North Haven here. It's the demographics of North Haven circa 1959. Foremost among the industries of the town must be placed the manufacture of brick. From its settlement, there has not been a time when this branch of labor has not been carried on. See, at this point in time, it had been brick making for almost a couple hundred years. And farming's an important industry too, and several small printing concerns. My family didn't go out much, but boy, did they have parties at home. Honest to God, my grandfather used to have to prop up the floor because he thought the floor was gonna cave in. There's my uncle, the clown. I only learned this recently, but another way to make money for a lot of brickyard workers, in this case my grandfather and uncles, was with all those marshes and the river and everything, we had a lot of muskrat here. And those are muskrat hides. And they get money for them. Johnny, what'd they give you for one of those hides? Yeah, and you were a teenager. That was fine. Yeah.
And they used to be coming to school late too, because they were hunting.
And these were plentiful where they worked. So they had access to where the muskrats were because the clay pits were all in the marsh, right in the middle of the marsh. That's my grandfather right there. And there's Blackie. My mother remembers Blackie. '50s, Stiles sponsored, and there's my uncle. All these kids are about in their early 70s now. I believe this ball field is where we are sitting right now. This was Heaton Field. And who? I don't know. I'm looking at names now.
It says Dan Forrest.
Yeah, we're right in the middle. We're right in the outfield of what was Heaton Field, which is this field right here. Also known as Knutsen's. You locals remember Knutsen's. This is early 60s because yours truly's right there. Yours truly is now 60. So what was I here, about 2, 3? I was tall and gangly. I didn't even know you were here. There's my brother. There's me and my brothers. Early, it's got to be 63, about 1963. Little color photo. A number of employees from the brickyard told me how much pride my grandfather had. There was never any rust on that steam shovel. It was always painted and clean. He had a lot of pride. He waxed it. He would actually detail his machine. You'd think he owned it. That was a P&H. Oops, sorry. Notice the cigar. For the record, it was White Owl. But here's my grandfather, who passed away in 1972 at the young age of 63, I believe. Cancer took him, and I was very close to him. I adored him. So I dedicate this to him. This is to honor him. He was the 5th born of Sperandio and Maria Guandolini. born in North Haven, Connecticut. From age 15 until his passing at age 63, his only job was at Stiles, later Plasticrete, totaling 48 years of employment. Most of these years, he operated a steam shovel. The largest clay pits he dug were the two on State Street, one of them later known as the Tire Pond. His son Richard became the town treasurer for 3 decades. His grandson, me, a local police officer for just as long. Zori never retired from the brickyard, having succumbed to cancer in 1972. He's buried in Center Cemetery on the street he lived and worked next to for nearly half a century. His younger brother was the last family member working for the brickyard. 2 out of 3 of his children are in the audience here. Louis Guandolini was the last family member to work at the brickyard. I believe it was until 1979. Yeah, but I was guessing. When you have the kids here, you double check. He was the youngest of Maria and Sperandio Guandolini's 6 children. Portions of some of his fingers were missing due to injuries at the brickyard over the years. He also resided in the town his entire life. He was still young there, so he's got all his digits. But every other finger was half gone. You know, he's missing half of his fingers. Because he worked in. My grandfather was out in the pit in a steam shovel. He actually worked in the yard or the kiln, where the manufacturing actually occurred. These are what few buildings are left at the State Street operation. Right by right on the Hamden line.
Oh, okay. Are they near the big tire pond?
Yes, same piece of property there, right behind the Goodwill store. That's all still there. Same place. You know, none of this is on the road. It's well into off the road. That's got to be turn of the set. That's got to be 1800s. That brick part. How did this get here? Oh. A little more information, Before there was railroad, bricks were loaded manually by 2 men and hauled to a building site by horse and wagon. Louis Circielli was the original person to deliver the brick by horse and wagon. His son later operated a fleet of trucks which took over the task for many years. By horse and wagon, 8,000 bricks a day were delivered. Trailer trucks later hauled 10,000 bricks a day. Each pallet would have 1,000 bricks that were hoisted onto trucks by forklift. It took 7 bricks for each square foot of a building. There were 2 reasons why brick making died out. The number of men who knew how to lay brick was relatively low, and the cost of labor for those who knew was very high. It was cheaper to use structural concrete, which are slabs of pre-stressed cement, which varied in size from 6 by 30 to 20 by 40. When you consider that it took 7 bricks per square foot, you can understand why the concrete panels were cheaper to install. That's why, from the late 70s on, most of your commercial buildings are built out of structural concrete and not brick. Basically, the masons priced themselves out of work. And of course, the ponds, what's left of the clay pits are the ponds alongside I-91. This is the Route 40 overpass over 91 looking south. I don't know if anybody ever noticed, but on the town seal, there's a brick. That's been our town seal since 1968 or 9. And thanks to me, I made sure we got bricks on the police department patch. I opted for a wall because nobody could figure out, what's that square red thing? So I said, let's put a wall in. So a few years ago, I got that wall in there. So this presentation is dedicated to the memory of my grandfather, Zori J. Guandolini, a man who was liked by all who knew him and adored by his family, even decades after his passing. By the way, I still have that outhouse. This was probably within a year before his passing, so I'm like 11 years old there. You like those arms? If I didn't have any heels on my shoes, my knuckles be dragging. that's it. Does anybody if anybody has any questions? I also have brick molds. Mr. Gagliardi, who's here, who I only met recently, donated these, about 40 of them. And these are the custom brick molds for custom brick that were Stiles. You know, there's all different shapes and sizes. I also have brick. You know, in the 1700s, if you built your own house, you know, back then, which means you had to make your own brick, because you had to have a fireplace and a chimney. So these are all homemade brick from North Haven houses. This was from 1780. You can see they're not as perfect. See all the defects in them? Big difference between manufactured ones in a plant. These are from houses that were torn down in North Haven in recent years, in which I knew what year they were built. Here's one, 1720. This was the that old house that got torn down 2 years ago across from where New Tiles Bus Company was. That house was 1720. It was used as a church. It was used as a sales office for Mono-East Brick.
And can I just add something about Mono-East Brick? I know you have an affinity for Stiles.
Well, no. Stiles is what I got the most.
I know. But I just wanted to mention, for those of you that don't know, Mono-East Brick Company was originally the Culver Brickyard. The owner of the Culver Brickyard was Ami Culver, who was Martha Culver's father. And the Martha Culver house on Quinnipiac Avenue that the Historical Society and the town of North Haven are in the process of renovating as a historic North Haven home is built of Culver brick by Ami Culver. That was his home. And Martha was willed the house when her dad passed away, and then her brother passed away, and she lived there until 1926, so she passed away, and then willed the house and all of the property around it, which are the Mono-East ball fields and the firehouse, to the town of North
See the
Haven,
defects?
to be used as a
1914.
community, facility. So I just wanted you to know that, you know, we do have other allegiances to brick yards.
And
Oh, and one other thing, which I think is important, and I think we alluded to this at a program that Marissa Hexter did on famous North Haven women. When Ami Culver passed away at a young age, his widow sold the brickyard to the Cody family. And when Mr. Cody passed away, his daughter took over running the brickyard. And she was the only woman brickyard owner in the country at the time that she, and once she married, for some reason, her husband then took over the business, and she was charged with running the boarding house. But she originally ran the company, and that company was, that brickyard was located down off of Quinnipiac Avenue where Cody Lane is now.
it's way south of all these other
Yeah.
ones.
And,
It's actually off the map.
And then that was bought out by what is now, what became known as Mono-East Brick Company.
We're,
That's just a little history.
their clay pit was, the Mono-East Brick Company's clay pit is where Republic Drive now is, which is all, it's just all industrial there. It's right alongside I-91.
Ted, your mother and I were talking before when you were looking at all the names of the people that lived on Stockmon Avenue, that you don't have an opportunity to get a picture of those row houses, do you?
I've never been able to find a picture of any of those houses. I would have loved, because I hear all the stories.
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, we knew everybody that lived, you know, in the row houses on Stockmon Avenue.
When they built I-91, they all got torn down, early 60s.
Yeah, that was an integral part of the brickyard, you know, where the families all lived. You had all the names of the people that we grew up with. Bettis and DeSimones and
Oh, yeah.
the Browns and
I grew up with those names,
Yep, yep.
hearing them on a weekly basis.
Okay, great presentation. Two questions. Do you know like what the typical order, but I'm just getting historical perspective. How much was a brick in the day, and did people order 1,000 bricks? Did they order 10,000 bricks? Do you have any idea about this?
They were about 5 cents a piece. Because an 8-inch standard concrete.
He worked there.
line was selling for 23 cents. Even a cinder block was selling for 20 cents years ago. But they were about 5 cents a piece, and you could order any amount. They usually put 10,000 brick on a truck, but a pallet consisted of about 500.
Wow.
I have a question, I don't think it has to do with bricks. The big pit off 91, would have been behind the Stop and Shop center, you know, where the
It was a sand,
shipping.
it was a sand pit.
Wasn't that the pit that they used to make 95 down by Long Wharf, fill in? As a kid, I remember a couple of summers, 24/7, there were dump trucks coming up from that bottom part of Monoese Avenue, 24/7. In the summer, we heard dump trucks, and my father told me that they were digging sand to bring down to where 95 is being built.
That was a sand pit years ago.
In 63, it filled in with water, with all the equipment still there.
But wasn't that used for
Sand.
building
The fine sand that they used to coat the wooden molds in order for them to show.
Yeah.
The
But I-
sand was all out
But she-
there. And unfortunately, a couple of young children playing in that
Yep,
area.
I remember that
killed
too.
them.
That was in the 60s too.
When those signs were posted, the company was still responsible.
I remember that.
But yeah, in 63, water just, they hit a vein of water or something, it filled in. There's huge dump trucks and construction equipment all got,
And it's very deep because
It is deep.
somebody wanted to make it like a town pond.
the town was gonna make it,
Because
a-
it's so,
it was gonna be a town beach and they never followed through, I don't know why.
because the drop off was so great, I understand.
I even have the articles, newspaper articles, talking about making it a town park, but that got killed for some reason. I don't know the reason. I have articles, I don't have follow-up articles. But yeah, all the ponds, you know, other than the Quinnipiac River, every other pond or lake is along 91 corridor was a pit, was either a clay pit or a sand pit. Because we got a lot of both. Couldn't find a use for red rock though, I guess.
I got a question about clay itself. Does clay freeze at the same rate as regular earth?
Soil.
No, because it had more density to it.
So then what was the reason for the seasonal work?
Probably because of the cold conditions, because all those things were handled by hand. That's probably the.
So the work was
And
more
yeah,
than,
and then for snow, they couldn't do much more for snow.
because I just don't figure for.
And
That may have been the wire cut plant was closer to the station.
another reason the clay industry kind of ended in the Northeast is because they couldn't compete with the brickyards down south because they didn't have to deal with winter. So the operating costs were cheaper for the brickyards down south. I know that as well.
Will the pipe that's kind of just the red New England commercial, or like the South where you had pastel colors?
I read that North Haven, Hamden, the brick from this clay bed is the only brick in America that's naturally red. Everybody else's clay is brown and had to be dyed red. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, in Stiles' case, this was one of 3 brickyards they owned. They owned one in Berlin and one in Massachusetts. Yep. Yep. So it was the longest ever industry in the town's history.
Yeah, there were some impurities in it, but mostly small pebbles. I reckon some of the brick that were manufactured, you can actually see a stone that was left in the clay product. No, it was too thick. But in addition to the water, they would add lime to the raw clay that was mixing into
So there's a rock in it?
to give it the plasticity to go into the.
It was hard.
Exactly, like the same way you make for baking a cake.
Yep. At the end of that, used to be the Upjohn Chemical Company, before Upjohn Chemical Company, it was a clay pit there.
Yeah.
They know off the
7 days in a row, so you can imagine the heat from the generator.
Yeah.
Unless it was a real light.
I was told by someone who lived there and the pit was in their yard
Until the cooling process.
that
Then.
the bricks that they found over the edge that said Stiles on them that
So
was
the guys
pit.
would go and starting at the top.
If that was true, like you got a ton of the bricks.
There was also clay pits off of Elm Street Extension. There were Corporate Drive is. There's 2 ponds on Corporate Drive. Those were clay pits. Right across from the high school, there's 2 ponds. The trees kind of block them out. There's a big pond there. That was a clay pit. But this is the standard size of brick. The dimensions of this. This is the 1700s.
Oh, wow.
You know, these are homemade. People make these in their backyard and build their house. These are colonial times. And this is the, the standard that became the standard in the 1800s.
Yeah, do they say how much a brick is worth since we have bricks?
And you can see, not every brick turned out well.
No.
This one says 1914 on it. You see how that?
So 100 years old.
This is a fail.
It's a fail.
This is a failure.
This is like George Washington.
These are colonial. These were chimneys. You see the block? This was part of a chimney. I'm just glad I got a technical expert in the audience. This comes and goes. One of them's got to work. None of them. I still have any, if anybody wants a flyer for the Main Street. The weather's nice, it's a nice weather. Not all that. I also got membership forms for Historical Society. It's an individual membership is $15.
Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.